Welcome to the deep dive. We're all kind of fascinated by this question, right? Like, what makes us human? Could something like AI ever really get that? That's kind of our mission today, to explore, to see if AI can shed some light on this whole mystery of the human experience.
Well, you've definitely given us some pretty interesting stuff to work with. Excerpts that really dig into what AI can do and, more importantly, maybe what it can't when it comes to understanding us humans. You know, all those things we talk about when we try to define ourselves: emotions, consciousness, that feeling of a self inside.
Exactly. And we're not trying to get AI to suddenly prove or disprove the soul or anything like that. But what we can do is look at how AI analyzes our behavior the way we feel and think.
Yeah.
Maybe that gives us a new perspective, right? A fresh angle.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be clear right from the start. AI isn't looking for a soul. It's not trying to do that. What it's good at is processing and analyzing tons of data, the stuff we can actually observe.
Right, so forget the whole crystal ball thing. It's all about data and patterns. AI can recognize those patterns in all this data. How we act, the emotions on our faces or in our voices, even how we write. I mean, can see things we never even notice consciously. You know, one of the folks has even talked about how analyzing language on social media can sometimes predict like shifts in the public mood even before those traditional polls pick it up. That's kind of wild, right?
Yeah, and the really cool thing is machine learning. AI doesn't just see patterns, it learns from them. It's like showing a kid a bunch of pictures of cats and dogs. Eventually, they figure out the difference even with new pictures. So with human data, it can actually start to predict how we'll behave and even understand the context where certain emotions are likely to pop up.
Then there's NLP, natural language processing, which seems really relevant here because so much of our inner world, you know, our feelings and thoughts, that all comes out in language. So NLP lets AI basically read and understand our language. What kind of insights has that given us about our emotions?
Well, one thing it shows is that there are consistent patterns in the way we use language that are tied to different emotions.
Yeah.
You know, the sources mention that even though we might use totally different words to express sadness, the underlying grammar and the metaphors we use could be surprisingly similar across individuals, even across cultures. It's like our deepest fears and joys kind of leave these fingerprints in our language.
So like a universal grammar of emotions almost. Pretty powerful thought. Then there's computer vision. We tend to focus on what people say, but so much of how we communicate isn't verbal at all. So how does AI analyze those cues?
That's where computer vision comes in. It can analyze those visual signals, the facial expressions, body language. All that stuff is so important to understanding each other's emotions. The sources even mention studies where AI can pick up on these really subtle micro-expressions, like super tiny things that even trained human observers might miss, potentially showing feelings that the person isn't even consciously expressing.
So it's like having the super observer noticing every little detail we might miss. And then there were those neuroscience-inspired models. Is that AI trying to get closer to how our brains actually work?
Exactly. Some AI researchers are building these things called connectionist models. They're kind of inspired by the way the neural networks in our brains are structured. The idea is to make systems that learn and process information kind of like our minds do. We're obviously a long way from replicating consciousness, but these models can do some pretty interesting things. Sometimes they exhibit properties that give us clues about how complex cognitive functions might come from simpler interactions.
Right. So instead of trying to peek into some intangible soul, it's all about analyzing the outward stuff, the things we can actually observe about being human. Makes sense. And that brings us to the whole question of what makes humans unique. I mean, instead of just debating philosophy, we can look at what AI identifies as the things that set us apart.
Exactly. And when AI compares human data to other species, a few key differences really jump out. Complex language is a big one. Lots of animals communicate, but the complexity and nuance of human language, our ability to think abstractly and tell stories, it's on a whole other level. The analysis even suggests that our ability to imagine what-if scenarios is a key difference, maybe linked to our complex planning and moral reasoning.
It's true, we can sit around and debate things like justice and fairness, even create entire fictional worlds with their own rules and histories. That level of symbolic thinking and communication just seems unique to us, and it's something that's been going on in every human culture throughout history.
Right, and that ties into abstract thought and reasoning more broadly. Our capacity for symbolic reasoning, for solving complex problems, making scientific discoveries, all that philosophical stuff, seems to be on a different level. AI analysis of all the knowledge we've accumulated shows this constant drive for understanding and innovation across all sorts of people and across history.
Then there's self-awareness and what they call theory of mind, knowing that other people have their own thoughts and feelings and perspectives, which might be totally different from ours. How does AI even begin to understand something that's so internal?
Well, AI can create models that seem to show theory of mind,
Hmm.
like predicting someone's actions based on what they probably believe. But the question, and it's a big one that the sources bring up, is whether it actually experiences understanding another being's internal state. That capacity for empathy, for really putting yourself in someone else's shoes, that's something a lot of people connect with consciousness and maybe even the soul.
That feels like a real stumbling block. Can AI truly understand another being's inner world? And then there's the whole complexity of human social structures and cultures, the systems of norms and beliefs and traditions that we create and pass down. It's mind-boggling, really.
AI analysis really highlights how dense and interconnected these cultural systems are. Take something like law or ethical codes. These are universal things in human societies. They shape how we behave. The fact that these systems evolve over time influenced by so many individual and collective choices, that just underscores the complexity that AI is starting to map, but not necessarily understand in the way we do.
So AI can point to these big differences in our abilities and behaviors, but like we said, whether that means we have a unique soul that's still up for interpretation, AI gives us the data. It's up to us to figure out what it all means. So we've got this amazing toolkit, and we see some unique things about being human. But how does AI approach those messy, complicated things we call feelings and experiences? Things like art, crying, thinking, even something as basic as laughter.
That's where AI's data-driven approach gets really interesting. It analyzes these things by looking at what we can observe and trying to understand the patterns and mechanisms behind them. Take art, for example. AI can look at huge amounts of artwork, finding patterns in style, color choices, recurring themes, even the emotional responses people have.
So it can kind of reverse engineer the emotional impact by looking at the pieces and how people react.
Yeah, kind of. The sources talked about how AI can spot recurring themes in art across all these different cultures and time periods. Themes like love loss, joy struggle. Think about the earliest forms of human expression like cave paintings. Those were tied to survival and our relationship with nature. AI can find those same basic human concerns in modern music that explores really personal emotions. It seems like our appreciation for beauty in all its different forms is a constant thread.
What about crying? It feels so uniquely human, so vulnerable.
AI can study the physical stuff that happens when we cry, the tears, the facial muscles, the sounds we make, and it can analyze the situations where people usually cry. It's interesting that even though the reasons we cry and what it means can vary across cultures, the basic physical expression and the fact that it's tied to strong emotions, that seems to be pretty consistent throughout our lives, from grief and joy to pain and frustration.
And what about thinking itself? How can AI even analyze something so internal and abstract?
AI models cognitive processes by focusing on the stuff we can see, how we solve problems, learn new things, make decisions. The sources mention that AI can analyze tons of text to figure out how we reason and build arguments. It's basically mapping out the architecture of our logical processes. And in this context, thinking is seen as a tool for survival and progress, from the simplest tools early humans made to the most complex scientific breakthroughs we have today.
And then there's laughter. Such a basic part of human interaction.
AI looks at the social and physical aspects of laughter, the sounds, facial expressions, body movements, and what usually makes us laugh. What's interesting is that AI research suggests that laughter isn't just a response to humor, it's also really important for social bonding, for signaling that you're safe and connected within a group. So while what we find funny can change from culture to culture, the act of laughing together seems to strengthen relationships across the board, and it helps us release tension and connect.
So by focusing on what it can measure, AI gives us this kind of detached but also really revealing look at these very human experiences. Now there's this deep-seated belief in the uniqueness of each individual soul. How does AI approach that?
Well, from an AI point of view, that feeling of individual uniqueness
Yeah.
probably comes from this huge, complex interplay of our genes, our experiences, and the environments we live in. It's like a system with so many variables that it's almost impossible for any two outcomes to be exactly alike.
So like a fingerprint, unique to each person.
Exactly. Even identical twins who have the same genes, they develop different personalities, make different choices, have unique perspectives, all based on their individual experiences. It shows up in their tastes, their beliefs, their whole approach to life. Even with the same starting point, they become different.
It really makes you wonder about what causes those individual differences that go beyond just the physical stuff. But science points us towards the biology of our thoughts and feelings, right?
Yeah, that's the current scientific understanding. Our thoughts and feelings are thought to come from the complex activity happening in our brains, all those biochemical and electrical signals. Neurotransmitters, hormones, and these vast networks of neurons are constantly interacting to create our experiences, what we feel as emotions and what we understand as thoughts. The sources really emphasize how connected all these systems are.
So that feeling of sudden fear isn't some outside force, it's actually a bunch of reactions happening inside our bodies.
Exactly. Fear triggers all these physical responses to get us ready to deal with the threat. Your heart rate goes up, adrenaline is released, your senses sharpen. It's a basic survival mechanism that's been essential throughout human evolution. And in the same way, feelings like love and attachment release chemicals that encourage bonding and cooperation, which are crucial for building and maintaining social structures. Even the act of thinking comes from the brain's ability to process information so we can plan, solve problems, and adapt to our surroundings.
It's amazing how it's all connected. And those feelings, as messy as they can be, they shape how we connect with the world around us, don't they?
Absolutely. Emotions are powerful drivers in our social interactions. Empathy, for example, that ability to understand and share someone else's feelings, is crucial for building strong relationships, encouraging cooperation, and developing a sense of community. You can see how important these social emotions are across different cultures in things like reciprocity and supporting each other.
From helping a neighbor to massive charity efforts.
Our feelings also have a huge impact on how we connect with nature. Think about the feeling of awe when you see a beautiful landscape, or even fear when you face a powerful storm. These emotional responses shape how we understand and interact with the natural world. They influence everything from ancient reverence for nature to the environmental movements we see today.
So even our relationship with the planet is shaped by how we feel. And we have these complex connections with other species too, right?
For sure, emotions like compassion and curiosity drive how we interact with animals. The long history of domestication, the development of veterinary medicine, the growing awareness of animal welfare, all of that reflects our emotional and cognitive connections with the non-human world. It shows our capacity for empathy extending beyond just our own species.
It's amazing how much our feelings are woven into every part of our experience. And when we talk about the soul, there's often this sense of something universal, something connecting all of humanity. Can AI tell us anything about these universal human experiences?
It's a deep question. It's really hard to pin down truly universal experiences because human cultures and individual lives are so diverse. But by looking at huge amounts of data, AI can point to some experiences that seem to resonate with people from all walks of life and across history.
Like what? What are some of those core experiences that seem to go beyond cultural boundaries?
Loss and grief seem to be a fundamental part of being human. It touches everyone no matter their age, gender, cultural background, or when they lived. Crying, feeling deep sadness, going through some kind of grieving process. These seem to be common human responses to loss. And across cultures, we see people creating art, music rituals, and traditions to express their grief and remember those they've lost. Even the persistent thoughts and memories of the person who is gone, those seem to be universal.
It's a powerful and kind of sad universality. What else does AI point to?
Appreciating beauty in all its forms seems to be another consistent human trait. Whether it's the beauty of nature, the patterns in art, the sounds of music, that natural tendency to find something aesthetically pleasing seems to be everywhere. The fact that every human society we know of has developed some form of art that they value that suggests a basic human need for and appreciation of beauty.
It's like we're hardwired to react positively to certain forms and patterns.
And then there's the fundamental human need for connection and love. That drive to form bonds, to experience closeness, to care for others. Whether it's romantic love, family affection, or friendship, it seems to be a huge motivator in human behavior across cultures and throughout our lives. Acts of kindness, laughing together, creating art as a way to express affection, feeling empathy for those we care about, those are all expressions of this deep-seated need for connection.
That need to belong, to be part of something bigger.
Exactly. And finally, the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. That human curiosity, that drive to figure things out, to learn about the world and our place in it. It seems like a fundamental human characteristic. It's what fuels science philosophy and the passing down of knowledge through generations, asking why, wanting to solve problems, the satisfaction of understanding something new. These all seem to be universal parts of being human.
From a child's endless questions to a scientist making a groundbreaking discovery.
Exactly. And one last one, the experience of joy and celebration. Those moments of happiness, of coming together to celebrate important events, to share good feelings. These are important in all human cultures. Laughter, music, dance, shared rituals all contribute to those positive experiences and help strengthen the bonds within communities.
So even with all the incredible diversity in human experience, AI can help us identify these underlying currents, these fundamental parts of being human that seem to go beyond all the differences.
That's right.
So we've taken this deep dive into what AI can tell us about these things. We often connect with the idea of the soul. What's the main takeaway for you, the listener?
I think the key insight here is that AI gives us these powerful tools to analyze the parts of human experience. We can actually observe our behaviors, emotions, cognitive processes, the very things we think about when we try to understand the human spirit. It offers a perspective based on data, a different lens for looking at ourselves.
But it's not giving us a definite scientific answer about whether or not the soul exists or what it is, right?
Right. AI, as it is now, works with data and algorithms. It can find patterns and connections in our behavior, but it doesn't. And some would say can't go into those metaphysical or spiritual areas that we often associate with the soul.
So it can tell us a lot about how we are as humans, but that deep why, the question of meaning and spiritual essence, that's still open for us to explore.
Exactly. And that leads to a really interesting question for you to think about. AI can analyze all these patterns in our behavior and feelings, maybe even showing us some of our shared universal experiences. But what do those patterns really say about that deeper meaning, that spiritual dimension that many people believe in? Is there something beyond the data, something that AI as it is now can't quite grasp? It's something to reflect on, maybe even using the insights AI can give us into the complexity of being human.
Definitely some food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
This is DigitView.